think we're good to go. All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the May 8th Planning Policy Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. Staff, do we have a quorum tonight?
Yes, we do. Commissioner Oliner and Chair Boyce have excused absences tonight.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kristen. All right, now we will move on to the minutes. So our first item of business is to take action to approve the minutes for the April 24th PPC meeting. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes provided in the agenda packet? Shaking heads. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Our next item of business is public comment. For this meeting, we're holding general public comment at this time for all general topics being discussed by the commission. Staff, has anyone signed up to make a public comment?
No, they have not.
All right. Thank you very much. With no public comments, we will go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is Title 18 Policy Amendments. Kristen Leeson, our principal planner, will be presenting tonight. And Kristen, whenever you're ready, you may go ahead.
There you go. Good evening. I'm Kristen Leeson, Principal Planner for Community Planning and Development Department. We're going to talk about more policy amendments tonight. We're just going to review, I'll present them, and then if you all would like, you have the opportunity to ask questions and discuss and provide feedback. Let us know if there's anything else that you need prior to the public hearing next week. So direction from the council, or direction that we're looking for, is do you have any concerns with providing flexibility for the common, or for the community and private amenity spaces? Oops, excuse me. Trying to get this out of my way. Sorry, there's something, there we go. And are the proposed changes clear, or are additional changes needed to add clarity? So again, a review for you. We did our 2023 Title 18 overhaul, and since it was huge, massive, combining many documents, so as I've said before, bound to be a few things that might have been missed or things that could be improved. So we are constantly checking for quality control. We actually have a running list of amendments that need to be made that will be coming back to you next year after these. We broke these into two different groups, clarifying amendments and policy amendments. These are considered policy amendments. However, in this group, we really have minor amendments, state required amendments, and policy amendments that you all will be looking at next time and tonight. First ones are the minor amendments. We have you saw this last time, there were daycare operations and adult family homes. And there was confusion because both of these at the same time required home occupation permits. However, they're also permitted uses. So we have removed them out of the home occupation section and made it just so that they require permits. But then we realized when we brought this to you last time that we put the standards for each of these remained in commercial, which doesn't make sense, and they're allowed in both. So we took that out and gave them their own section, and that's why we're giving it again to you tonight. Our permit term extension and expiration, a building, so I'm sorry, I said a building permit, but a land use permit is issued, and it will expire anywhere from, say, 3 to 5 years, depending on the permit that they have, a site development permit 1, 2, or 3, or yes. And in that time, the 3 to 5 years, a building permit needs to be issued. If the building permit is not issued, or if it's issued, I'm just going to get all this confused. But what's happened is we don't want the building permit to expire before that, or the land use permit to expire before that construction permit has been issued. So this is allowing us to extend the land use permit. Now, caveat, we are going to, this is at our city attorney's office, and this will probably be adjusted a little bit because as I didn't explain it very well, it's probably not written as it should be written to be clearer. So that will be clarified a little bit better when we come back next time. Next is our permitted uses table. So as you know, we kept finding uses that were omitted from the last one. So we actually had a lovely person in our office go through every single permitted uses table that we had prior to the update and compare and contrast. So we found more uses. So we're just bringing all of those to you. Now, also in this, we found that there were some footnotes that were not incorporated into the update. So we are now going through all the footnotes. So I think there should be just about 2. Those will come back with the public hearing edition of this on the 22nd. And with short-term, long-term bicycle parking requirements and off-street parking, which was put into the wrong slot, that's not a state requirement, it's actually a minor amendment. All of those, again, there were uses that were omitted from the 2023 update. Any questions on those? Okay. Next, we have our tree retention exemption. And this is a state requirement. And the state says that if someone's trying to build a residential development, middle or multifamily housing, and they apply all of the tree preservation code, and they're also trying to comply with the parking code, but all of the parking makes it so that the tree code doesn't work, then you can either reduce or remove the parking requirement for that residential housing, because we don't want to prohibit any residential housing from being constructed, because it is needed. Yes.
Commissioner Krass.
So when you have a conflicting policy, something has to take priority. So did I read this right? So trees take priority over parking?
Yes.
And can you talk more about, is that going to help building, or would the opposite help building more, where someone can build and have have parking versus a tree and do something different with trees?
Well, if someone's going to, if the parking is going to prevent, if either one of those is going to prevent residential from being built, then yes, I think I'm not answering your question, then yes, parking could be foregone. And with the middle housing, with co-living housing, with conversions of multifamily housing, the state's actually not allowing parking to go in, or they're not requiring us to make parking go in within a half mile of major transit stops. So that's just kind of the way the state's headed right now.
So, but let's walk through the scenario here. So someone has a small lot and they want to build a single-family house. And I'm just trying to understand because the trade-offs.
Okay, but it doesn't apply to single family.
Oh, this is not single-family?
No, it's just
okay.
middle housing and,
Okay.
yeah, middle housing and multifamily housing.
Okay, so trees take precedent over parking is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and the last one, I apologize, I have an echo, but, okay. Deviations in community amenities. This is our policy question for you. So we have heard that developers are finding it difficult to build multifamily residential housing with our current code requirements. So we are looking at making amendments to these and allowing deviations. Now, the deviations would provide flexibility in order for developers to rehab or reuse spaces and for new multifamily development. So currently our code says that common amenity space, which is something for everybody to use, maybe it's a park in the middle of it or a big plaza, every unit you're required to have 100 square feet of common amenity space for every unit that's in the building. You are also required to have private amenity space, private open amenity space for every unit in the building, which means that every unit either needs a balcony or a patio or a big stoop, something that's 48 square feet that's attached to that unit to go with it. And this is what builders are finding difficult. So what we're proposing is not to change the amount of open space and amenity space that's required, but to allow developers to combine, to do a deviation and combine the 148 square feet into one. So if they need to, they can put most of that all into common space. It can go on a rooftop deck. It can go somewhere else, as long as 50% of the units still have that private amenity space. As long as they can combine it, as long as 50% of the units still have their private amenity space.
When I was looking at the table, it's basically only central Issaquah that's affected. Do I read that correctly?
It's all multifamily in the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner
welcome.
Kress?
So the two things you laid out well, which is the bigger issue of getting things built? Is it the private amenity, meaning still doing half of them to have a balcony? Does that make certain developments not feasible? I'm curious with the feedback that you got, which was the bigger issue of those two?
As I understand it, and I could be wrong, it is the private spaces.
Follow-up then, is still requiring 50% solve that, or does that still make it hard to build a big apartment building when you have to have balconies? And
We'll see. We are hoping that it makes it easier for people to build.
do other jurisdictions have this type of private?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Oh, do they have the private requirement for units?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a follow-up question as well. Does that only affect apartments, or is it also, I mean, is it apartments and actually condos which would be owned?
It is multifamily. So multifamily is
Okay.
anything with 6 units or more.
And is this to actually, sorry, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Yes?
finish your question.
I was just waiting
Okay.
for it to see who Commissioner Patterson, who was going to call on.
Oh, okay. Does it, so I kind of lost the train of my thought here. Sorry, I just totally lost the train of my thought.
All good. We'll go to Commissioner Mole, and then we can come back. Go ahead, Commissioner Mole.
Okay. So when they said we're having trouble building, that seems to me like a pretty general statement. Was it that they were having trouble with the design and construction, or was it the economics?
I believe both. It was the design and the economics, so, yeah.
And when they said we're having trouble building, did that mean they were having trouble getting financing? Sorry,
No,
I'm getting-
it just meant they're having trouble making it pencil out, making it feasible.
making it, you know,
All right.
the cost of land.
Commissioner Kress, go ahead.
I'm still trying to noodle on how hard the private amenities say. So if you look at the Vail, I'll just pick on Vail and Atlas. Would they pass this? Do they have half of them that have a balcony? I'm just trying to think of how hard of a bar this balcony for half of an apartment building. It seems like it's a fairly high bar. And when you look at these apartment buildings, they don't seem like they have balconies. And I just wonder how hard of a thing this is, and are we painting ourselves into a corner and we're going to be disappointed when no one's building anything because the
Well,
economics?
Alice and Vale didn't fall under these standards
I understand
when they were
that, but-
built.
but
No, I mean, even
they
under,
still-
even under our existing ones, they were built prior to that.
I'm just curious, do they have balconies? or not?
You know what, I'm trying to envision Atlas right now and Vale, and I don't think so.
Yeah. I'm just curious how we got to the 50%.
We looked at what some other cities do, and yeah, we're going to have to see how it pans out.
And
you know,
will we have another feedback loop with
Not yet,
developers?
No.
Is that part of the process?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Commissioner Issaquah first.
Thank you. Well, I had several conversations with developers, and one of the questions, the way it was presented, was why are we, and that is something that is on my mind actually, why are we presenting so many common amenity space requirements? They are expensive. They don't need to be built, but the land is still expensive maybe. When we have all of these parks and trails and all of the spaces that people can use. So basically, why do we put them inside of the buildings or surround buildings with them when people can use spaces that are already there? And that won't take money to be produced, to be built, or to be bought as a land, like whatever needs to happen there. That was my understanding, kind of. That's what I hear.
So are you asking me why we require that? or-
Well, I'm saying my understanding of the thing about the common amenity space. Like, why do we require buildings to have common amenity spaces when there is a space already there, like our parks, our trails, all of those things?
Well, and part of that, when we were considering, especially during the Central Issaquah plan, that's when the green necklace came about, which is now going to be Creeks to Peaks. It's because we were allowing all trees at the time to be graded if they needed to. But we didn't want it to be a concrete jungle in Central Issaquah, so we still needed those, if you're in an apartment and you have children, you still need places for those kids to go. If you have a pet, you want to let them go out on the balcony, you want to sit outside, you need that fresh air, you need some spaces for people to go inside so it's not a concrete jungle. And that's
Commissioner
what people
Moll?
were, when we were doing the Central Issaquah plan and the Central Issaquah standards, council at the time that was a concern. And with the public as well.
Commissioner Moll?
I support staff's decision
I think you need to speak into your microphone, please.
I support staff's position that we need more, that we need to allow for common areas and require them, because without them, we will have a concrete jungle, to quote you, and because when you look at better quality communities, they tend to allow for outdoor areas for children, for people to gather, because without those local gathering spots, we will create a city that is not community-oriented, because people gather in those community-oriented spaces in small areas. You have the neighborhood park concept. The one thing I did want to say is that when I think about what 48 square feet is, that's really 8 feet across, 6 feet deep. That's all it is a fairly standard balcony. More than a Juliet balcony, which might be 12 feet across and 4 feet deep. And so I question the comment we can't afford to build, because if they're still having to build 50% of the units, I'm trying to figure out how much of a cost savings there really is. That's my opinion.
Commissioner Adair?
Yeah, I just want to throw in, I agree, I think community space is really important. I think it's important for the feel of Issaquah to maintain that. I think it's important to create third places for people to gather. It's important to have safe places for kids to play. I'm all for allowing flexibility between community and private open space, but I do think that there needs to be a space requirement. And so I think this is a good start. We can get some feedback. But yeah.
Commissioner Matthews?
So where I was originally going to ask was, this is not driven by having to put in affordable housing. This is driven just by, in general, cost related to developing an apartment complex or a condo complex. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Because I also agree, I live in a complex that has a huge green space, excuse me, and some of the units nearby have none. So they come into our space. So you end up giving the burden of taking care of a space to somebody else. What you really want to do is make sure everybody has space, again, for kids and for pets or whatever. Each kind of unit should actually have their own common space. So I completely agree. It's a good start. Thank you.
I'll ask a question. Can you remind me, with a deviation, is that something that has to be approved through the permitting process, or is that like an option that they can take?
It has to be approved through the
Okay.
permitting process.
Gotcha. I assume as long as they're meeting those requirements, it's typically approved.
Yes,
There's no reason you would deny it.
right. If they're meeting the code,
Yeah.
then we would approve it.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? All right, back over to you, Kristen.
Oh, there it is. I forgot to show this to you earlier. There you go. Sorry. Leave that up there for a second. Okay, so actually, all I have are timing and next steps. So next meeting on May 22nd is the public hearing, and then we are tentatively going to the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee on June 10th, and then on July 7th to City Council for action. So these are our, I think you all may have addressed some of these already, but if you have any more questions.
All right, Commissioners, I think we've seen some of these once before. This is kind of our second crack at it, and then we'll get one more opportunity in a couple weeks when we take formal action. So now would be the time that if you have any questions or any additional information you'd want between now and the public hearing, now is kind of our opportunity to ask. We'll go with Commissioner Adair and then Commissioner Krast.
Yeah, I just always like specifics. So if there's like a specific development and they're running into roadblocks because of this, and we could hear about it, that would be great.
So I understand, so you have two different things. You have public and private. And I'm curious if there's a thought of, and we had some good discussion, I think public is really important because I think that's a longer lasting thing that the city will have forever and ever when you have green spaces. Do you see there's another variant where a developer can have the option of not doing any private, but do even a larger public as a trade, and give them the flexibility of, you have, instead of just one or two things, you have a broader menu of options of the things that are acceptable to the city? Because I could see that as one, because then you could build, if they're building apartments, they may not need balconies, but you have a nice outdoor space that could serve as a great place for people to let their dogs out and all of that.
Well, that's what this does, because they would still be required,
But 50% of them still have to have a balcony.
right, 50% would have, but the thing is, they would still have to have, if you have, I'm really bad at math, if you have 10 units,
Yep.
right, they each have to have 148 square feet of space, private amenity and then common amenity. Now, they have the option to still provide 148 square feet per unit, but for 50 of those units, the 48 square feet would be combined with the common open space, so then they do get a bigger open space.
So-
But then 50 of the units would still have 48 square feet individually on there.
So here's, I'll throw out an example. You could say, okay, we have to have even a bigger public space, but have no requirements for private space, is one of the options for a developer to have. So they have 200 square feet per unit in an outdoor space, but no balconies on any units. Is that something that we would want to entertain so you have a menu of options to make it easier for them to build something that may be right for any given area?
That is something that the Planning Policy Commission could propose as a motion when this comes to a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mole.
I have a question about the trees, the minor amendment regarding the trees. It appeared to me that, that the state, you said it's state mandated.
Yes.
Does our tree green policy allow for because trees take precedent over parking, does our policy allow parking to, is there any way that we can create our policy so that we can have people replant smaller trees? So that if you've got a tree that's in the middle of your driveway, where the driveway has to go, that you could say plant smaller trees?
So again, this only applies to middle housing and multifamily housing, so not single-family housing. So it's probably not going to be in somebody's driveway,
Well, I was thinking like condo. I
like
was
a
thinking
condo
like
and
townhouses
those driveways.
When I said no.
We do allow people to, if they remove a tree, you plant a tree. And Minnie, do you want to step in here? Am I on track here? Okay, I'm on track. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and to Minnie's point, that's probably a better discussion to have with the tree code when it comes back in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because that's one of the public hearings that we're
Easy.
having. Okay.
Commissioner Matthews.
Can I ask a question just about the deviation versus a variance? Is a deviation in there to make, so you don't have to go through the whole variance process? Is that, because it says that if you get rejected on your that you could go right into the variance process. So it's kind of like, why are we just not going straight to the variance process?
I'm phoning a friend.
Okay,
Sure. So, the basic concept here for this deviation, the community open spaces, because we heard from developers that some of the reasons are, moisture penetration. It does rain around here, so when you have a building that has to have these, they have to treat it better so that, for the long term and things of that nature. So, and the other thing, I think before the Title 18 update, the requirement in central Issaquah was lower. It was 48 square feet per unit, and you could choose between outdoor or private. The discussion with the community and the Planning and Policy Commission at the time and all the Parks Board and others was that's not enough. And so therefore, I think the standard was proposed was 100 square feet. The community and the boards and commissions said, yes, 100 is fine, but we also need private open space. And so that happened at a community, through that discussion. And so now we're just bringing forward in terms of the two applicants that we've kind of heard this from, that perhaps every unit getting a balcony isn't, although you can do rooftop terraces and private open spaces and patios and ground floor and all those count towards private open space, but generally the most cost-effective way they're saying is it's by putting balconies. So all that to say, deviation versus a variance part of your question, deviation is administrative, so it's less, it provides more flexibility during their permit review process. It isn't a separate thing that they have to apply for a variance. The bar for a variance is very, very high. You can't do your project unless you're granted this variance. It's a public hearing process. A hearing examiner makes that decision, but it's meant for places where you have a really odd-shaped lot and you can't meet your setbacks, or you have a topography challenge that you're going to exceed the height, and otherwise you can't develop your property or something of that nature, and you have to meet all 8 criteria. So this deviation is meant more as a flexibility tool to say you still meet the intent of getting this, but not every unit has to have a balcony. And 50 really is debatable. So if Planning and Policy Commission feels like, well, if we're giving flexibility, let's just give it any or all, we could certainly go down that path. If you want to say 1/3, we're soliciting feedback, so hopefully we can hear from folks, to what type of, we know from the development community, it's probably going to be more flexibility is better because each project is different, each location is different, and how we kind of go down that path. The livability component for the people living in the units, the other stuff that we've heard around this topic is people don't use their balconies, even if they have them. They use it for storage of their bikes and extra stuff. So it's really a policy decision for you all to consider what makes sense in Issaquah's context.
We'll go Commissioner Krass first.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
make one note really quickly along with that. So when you did as Minnie mentioned, the deviation is administrative. But the variances, we only give variances for things like impervious surface and building on critical areas or steep slopes. Those are things that are going to affect the land itself and how it may affect other things outside of it. Whether people build, balconies, all balconies on all units, or whether they combine that into common space, that's not going to have the same effect on others that are on that site.
Quick, so rooftop deck on a new apartment building, that would be public though, not private, is that correct? I just want to make sure which side that would fall on.
Well, these are all it's actually called common open space.
Yeah, it
So
could
it's-
be common, but you could designate plots on that for, some senior developments in Seattle have where they get their plot for gardening. That's a rooftop thing, but it's a privately designated plot for you. So, but most of the rooftop amenities are common. open
Okay, so if you
spaces.
have like a big area with picnic tables and barbecues and patios, that would
Yeah.
be that would count as the public aspect.
Correct.
Okay.
And sometimes, with the kind of, larger scale apartment buildings, you see parking on the lower 2 floors, and the lid of that parking is where they put their open space. So the units that open onto that open space will have somewhat of a little, private open space and then the common, which also, I think one of the developers was saying, is a better thing for them because you don't have someone just walking by your windows and things like that. So you get a little private space, and then you have your common space around it.
Commissioner Adair?
Yeah, just to throw out, to see if this would be feasible, but on the idea of giving people flexibility, could we do something where we said, hey, any unit that opens directly onto a common space, you can combine their private space with the common square footage, and it's only units that are isolated from the common space that have the private space amendment. And that way, kind of, everybody in the building is getting access to outdoor space, but the way that, depending on how they design it, they could combine all of their private, as long as that unit opens into the community space.
Like, I think that's what we're trying actually to kind of propose right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So if you have
okay.
148 square feet, excuse me, if you're required to have 148 square feet and you're on that first floor and it opens up into the common space, there's your 148 square feet. As long as, all in all, it all adds up to your 1,048 square feet that those 10 units need. So, yeah.
Good math. Commissioner Mole?
I'd like to say that I very much appreciate the historic how we got here, because it changed my opinion. And I think had I not had the history, because since we only served 2 years, and especially for a new member, understanding the history of how this came to be, she completely changed my perception. So in the future, when you have something like this, if you could give us a brief synopsis of the history of how we got here, I think it would be helpful. Might be asking too much of you, I don't know, but I think it would be helpful.
And the other option is we are always open. So if if a commissioner calls us and says, I really need the history on that, well, then maybe other ones do too, so we can do that. Absolutely.
Can confirm, staff is great at handling all of our questions and at all hours of the day. No, I think just to kind of piggyback off this conversation is I do feel like it's a little bit of a Goldilocks thing where at first it sounded like pretty much no requirements about community space, or at least not what they were today, and that was too cold. And then we went to this 148 square feet, now that's too hot. So now we're trying the just right approach of the 50% and the flexibility. So as we can see by that historic sample size, there's opportunities to pivot as needed, and this is kind of one of those pivots. And if it doesn't work out, we can always revisit. But it sounds like based on the feedback that we've now gotten from developers, we can hopefully find the happy medium. Any other questions, comments?
Okay.
All right.
That's all I have.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Director Dollywall, for hopping in there as well. Always nice to have all your perspectives on that. Oh, that alarm can only mean one thing. It's time for City Council updates. All right, Kristen, do we have any City Council updates?
That was really good. Just one, and actually you all won't see this, but it's interesting. It'll go to the Development Commission, but the site plan for the transit-oriented development trailhead came in. And for those of you who don't know, it's been years in progress. It'll go next to the Transit Center. It is a joint venture with King County Housing Authority and private developer. And so half of the complex will be market rate, the other half will be affordable units. There will be some transitional units in there. It's around, and I'm not going to have these numbers right because they keep changing, but around 165 affordable and 155 market rate, with the together sort of center in the middle for people to use. So anyway, that it's gone to council a little bit. They're talking about some deviations from our standards to help make it work, but it's next door to the transit center. So there used to be a Quest or PSE station there, and they're moving that tower, if they haven't already, over to Tibbetts, and then they're going to put the structure there. So just kind of a fun thing to watch. Yeah, there we go.
Very cool. All right. And next on our agenda would be other business or announcements.
No, I just wanted to remind you that the next time we do have 2 public hearings. So the tree code, tree preservation update, and all of the policy code amendments. So bring snacks and get a good night's sleep the night before.
Eat your Wheaties, start hydrating now. Excellent. Commissioners, is there any other questions, concerns, business for the evening? All right. Well, if there is no further business before the commission, then we would like to adjourn this meeting at 7:05 PM.